Well, hello again. Welcome to Horror in Detail. Today we are going to share Wendigo and Skinwalker encounter stories. First story. This story was shared by u/altballsdeep, so credits to him. They burned down an entire forest to cover up something horrible. For my own safety, I will be using fake names for people and locations as I describe my experience. Whistleblowers often end up dead, after all. I used to live in a small town nestled up in the mountains, surrounded by a famous national forest. Let's call this town Greenville. Being born and raised there, I had an affinity and distinct familiarity with the surrounding mountain and its forest. Douglas, a childhood best friend, would accompany me on countless camping and hiking treks through the numerous trails located near our town. Now here's a disturbing fact you may or may not have known: an absurd number of people go missing in national parks and forests every year. A quick Google search will tell you that 1,180 people have gone missing in national parks between 2018 and 2023. That boils down to almost 300 people going missing every year. Why do I bring this up? Well, over a dozen people have gone missing in the national forests around Greenville in the 20-odd years I lived there. And it's a miracle that Douglas and I did not end up being among those numbers. You see, Douglas and I had a few disturbing experiences in that forest over the years. Back in the summer of 1999, we went out with our dads on a camping trip. Being adventurous and reckless kids at the time, Douglas and I snuck off the main trail and got out of sight from our parents. We spent hours playing hide and seek in the woods, looking at strange plants and poking at ant hills. You know, preteen boy stuff. Well, we started to panic when it got dark and we couldn't find our way back to the trail. "Dad? Where are you?" We both cried and called out. Soon the sun had dipped beyond the horizon, blanketing the forest in twilight. "Adam, I'm scared," Douglas said, jumping at the sound of an owl hooting in the distance. I took in a deep breath, looking around and thinking of a way to calm my friend down. That's when we heard something ahead of us. It sounded like the footsteps of a large man running across the brush at full sprint. Focusing my attention to the source of the sound, I scanned the tree line and caught a glimpse of a shadow darting between the tree trunks. Whatever made those huge footsteps moved like lightning between the trees, so fast you could blink and miss it. My heart dropped when I realized this shadow creature was zigzagging its way forward, towards where Douglas and I stood. "What the hell is that?" Douglas asked, his voice cracking in panic. Grabbing his arm, I tugged on him and started running in the opposite direction. "I don't know, but we need to get out of here." We ran through the forest, weaving between the trees until my lungs burned from the strain of running. I only looked back once, seeing the creature gaining on us at an alarming rate. For a brief moment, I thought I saw glowing amber eyes attached to the creature's blurry and distorted face. By some miracle, we popped out of the forest and arrived at one of the trail's flashlights were beaming through the tree line further down the trail, and we both sprinted full speed for the lights. At some point, that creature had stopped chasing us. We eventually ran into the people with the flashlights, who happened to be a search party that our dads had rounded up to go looking for us. Needless to say, we were in a lot of trouble and they didn't buy our story of being chased by a shadow monster. The next incident happened on my 21st birthday, back in the fall of 2008. My father took me on a camping trip up in the mountains and brought along a bottle of Jack Daniels to celebrate my legal drinking age. The plan was to set up camp, get drunk but not totally hammered, and maybe hunt some squirrel the next morning with my .22 long rifle. Well, we arrive at the campsite, get everything set up, and all seems to be going normal. That is, until nightfall. I had just downed my third shot of whiskey when a screeching sound wailed out into the cold night air. My dad, who was off relieving himself on a tree just outside the glow of the campfire, laughed in response to the noise. "What's the matter, kiddo? Jack on the Rock's too strong for you?" He stumbled back over to the campfire, fixing up the zipper on his jeans. "I didn't make that sound," I told him. He raised an eyebrow before grinning at me, like he thought I was messing with him. Just when he was about to say something, that screeching sound erupted into the night air once again. It sounded much closer than before. "What in the hell?" my dad shouted, looking around at the darkness surrounding our campsite. He rushed over to his tent and brought out his old lever-action hunting rifle and my comparably tiny .22 long rifle and tosses me my gun. "What was that?" I asked, checking my rifle and turning off the safety. He loaded up a round in his gun and brought it up close to his chest, ready to aim. In all the years I knew my old man, I had never seen his eyes so wide and full of alarm. "Boy, I don't know," he said, keeping his head on a swivel. "Been hunting out here for years and I ain't never heard an animal make a sound like that. Can't be good." I sat by the campfire, my hands shaking and unable to think of anything to say. Then the sound screeched out a third time, seemingly from somewhere right above me in the tree canopy. Taking me off guard, the screech made me jump back in fear, nearly causing me to soil my pants. If I could describe the sound, it had to be a mixture of a dying coyote and the strained vocal cords of a human child screaming in pain. Well, my dad wasn't having any of it. When he heard that sound booming from right above where I sat, he cursed and took aim with his rifle. The blast temporarily lit up the surrounding woods with the muzzle flash and sent a crack echoing through the wilderness. Following the gunshot, I heard a loud thud on the forest floor, as if something heavier than a grizzly bear had just jumped off the highest tree branch. Heavy footsteps followed, indicating something had broken out into a full sprint heading away from our campsite. We didn't get any sound sleep that night despite having some alcohol in us, and luckily the rest of the trip went by uneventful. The final experience I'll talk about before I reveal the truth is a gruesome one, so if you're squeamish, please be warned. A few years ago, a young woman went missing in the woods around Greenville. She was a local of the town, so everyone had come together to form a search party and look for her. That's just what we were about. A small town was a close-knit community and we looked out for each other. Douglas and I decided to join the search party and we were assigned to comb through the far northeastern section of the woods. We scoured the woods, calling out that woman's name for hours. "Jessica, are you out here?" She never turned up. Eventually, it got late and we had to turn back. Even though we brought flashlights along, the search party advised us not to go too far out at night since it could risk more people getting turned around and lost. Remembering the other chilling experiences I had in the forest at night, I had no problem with that stipulation. Douglas, on the other hand, didn't quite agree and indeed grew irritated that we had to pack up and leave before nightfall. You see, Douglas had a bit of a romantic interest in Jessica, so his motivation to find her ran much deeper than mine. Which is exactly why he stopped when he saw a small cave nestled between the trees on the side of the mountain. This cave wasn't unusual. There were plenty of them all over the mountain hidden within the forest, which made excellent hibernation dens for the local black bears. For that reason, I adamantly protested when Douglas suggested we go looking in the cave for Jessica. "Come on, maybe she took shelter in there. We gotta at least look." He drew closer to the cave, taking out the flashlight and shining it through them all. At this point, Twilight had crept in and detouring through a possible bear cave was the last thing I wanted to do. You want to go in there, fine. I'll stay out here and wait. I gave him a dead serious look. He scowled and turned to enter the cave, calling me a coward and a few other choice names as he entered. Taking a seat on a nearby rock, I waited and kept the flashlight on, pointed at the cave. It grew darker and my anxiety began to rise. What was only a few minutes had felt more like hours. When the silver glint of the full moon began to peek through the tree canopy, I cursed and turned to face the cave. "Doug, are you done looking around yet?" My voice echoed back from the cave. Just when I thought there wouldn't be a response, I heard my own voice speaking back to me. It said the same exact thing, albeit in a much lower, almost choppy and broken-sounding voice. "Doug, are you done looking around yet?" Frozen in place, I didn't know what to think. I heard my echo, and then the voice of something repeating my words back. I could feel my heart exploding in my chest as I turned to examine the forest around me. While I had my back turned to the cave, I heard Douglas scream. Quickly shining my light back to the entrance, I heard his footsteps crashing on the stone as he raced out of the darkness. His breathing had been elevated to hyperventilating levels, and he spoke incoherent nonsense. "Dude, it's horrible, oh my god dude." He fell to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably as he dropped the flashlight. "Whoa, calm down, just breathe and tell me what's wrong." He continued crying non-stop, unable to piece together words. I sat there rubbing his back, glancing back up at the cave and wondering what he saw. When his sobbing grew softer, another noise began to grab my attention. It was a wet, uncomfortable, mouth-slapping sound. Think of a big dog chewing on a piece of raw meat. When I realized the sound came from the maw of the cave, I raised my light at the entrance and felt all the blood drain from my body. A tall, humanoid shadow stood inside the cave. Amber eyes locked with mine and I watched in absolute horror and disgust as long, lanky and inhuman arms ripped flesh straight off of a dismembered human leg. Blood dripped off the severed body part as the creature took the bit of flesh and stuffed it into a mouth I couldn't even make out on its oblong head. Then I heard that wet, deeply uncomfortable chewing noise as that thing ate the raw human flesh. At some point, Douglas must have noticed the creature because he broke out screaming at the top of his lungs. I screamed with him, and we both ran away as fast as our feet would allow. Fortunately, that thing did not follow. I am now convinced that what I saw in that forest was a Wendigo. You see, after all my traumatic experiences, I've grown an affinity to research the paranormal and the unknown. The Wendigo is a creature known for feasting on the flesh of humans, and seems to best fit the description of what I saw in the forest that day. Now, here's an interesting twist. The Wendigo has long been said to have a weakness against fire, silver, and cold weather. The reason I mention this is because the national forest around Greenville suffered a catastrophic wildfire back in 2021. Since then, disappearances in the area have stopped. But there's more. In my last year of living in Greenville, just weeks before the fire, a group of strange people arrived at our town. They drove all black cars with government license plates. At the time, I was working as a volunteer for the park ranger services. These strange people came to the park ranger office, asked a few questions to my boss, and disappeared off into the woods for hours before coming back and just abruptly leaving. 6 days later, the forest fire that would devastate Greenville and the surrounding mountain would begin. Call me a conspiracy theorist, but I firmly believe that the government stepped into a Wendigo crisis unfolding around Greenville. And their solution was to burn it all down. Second story. This story was shared by you/normalalfalfa8523, so credits to him. If you see a Target store in rural Appalachia, keep driving. One day, while typing away on my computer, I got a call from my sister, Anna, in the middle of the workday. This was unusual because we weren't particularly close and usually only talk a few times a year. From the second I picked up, I knew something was wrong. "Adelia?" she asked, sounding stressed. "Yes," I answered. "What's going on?" "It's our Uncle Jim. He fell again." I sighed. My Uncle Jim and I were very close when I was growing up. He stepped in to help my mom with Anna and I after our father died and was the only father figure I knew. Up until last year, he was very healthy, at least for a 70-something man who'd smoked since he was 14. About a year ago, he fell off a ladder one day while painting his living room and his mobility never fully recovered. He'd fallen earlier in the month and sprained his wrist. He also had his electric shut off a few months back due to forgetting the bill. He seemed to be losing his self-sufficiency bit by bit. "I know you don't want to hear this, but I think it's time we started looking at nursing homes for him," Anna said. I shook my head. "No, we can't do that to him. He doesn't want to leave Rex in some dog shelter and he loves his gardening. He would also hate being stuck in some room all day." "Adelia, he wouldn't be stuck in a room all day. They have activities. He could make friends there." "No, we'll figure something else out," I cut her off, determined to make her see my point. "I care about him too and I'm not happy about this either," responded Anna. "But I'm scared that if we don't do something soon he's gonna end up seriously hurt or worse." "What about hiring a home health aide?" I asked. "I've already looked into that. Pickings are slim around here on his budget and so far I haven't been able to find anyone dash." "I'll do it," I volunteered without thinking. "What?" asked Anna, sounding surprised. "I'll move back and be his caretaker. My job's remote and I can clean out the extra room at his house to stay in." "Are you sure?" she asked. "I know you've been doing really well in Louisville." "I love it here," I admitted. "But I want to help Jim. It's the right thing to do. He was always there for us when no one else was." "I mean that's great, but aren't you worried about living in the same town as Chase?" she asked. I sighed. The protection order's still in effect and Jim has plenty of guns and a big dog. "I think I'll be okay." "Well, I got to get off the phone, but if you're serious about this I can talk to Jim." "I am," I responded. After ending the call I sat there in shock. I knew I wanted to be there for Jim, but I couldn't believe I was moving back to the small West Virginia town I had to flee just 4 years ago. I spent the next 2 weeks packing my things and tying up the loose ends of my brief stint in the city. I knew I would miss it. While a lot of my friends craved the wide open spaces, farmland, and light traffic of smaller towns, I felt nothing but dread the second I left city limits. I'd enjoyed growing up in the small town, but as I got older the facade of it being a safe and quiet place began to disappear. Things seemed to get really bad when a local factory closed, leaving many people out of a job. Drug use was also rampant in the area and an increase in theft and property crimes followed. Small businesses closed due to the lack of income and it was generally accepted that anyone who didn't move away would likely spend their lives in poverty. The lack of employment wasn't the only reason I left. I was a freshman in high school when I met Chase, who was a senior. I quickly fell for him and moved in with him immediately after graduation. Although he'd been controlling throughout our relationship, I never knew he was capable of violence until his first outburst a few months into us living together. I left a year later. Unfortunately, Chase didn't take the breakup well and immediately began stalking me. I would often notice his car driving past my home and place of employment. He also wrote me unhinged letters accompanied by flowers, sometimes alive, sometimes dead. I went to local police several times for help and was basically laughed off or told this was just a relationship issue that I needed to work out. Chase had a cousin in the police force, which likely didn't help my case. I had few ties to the small town, especially after my mom passed, and decided the most rational option would be to leave. I arrived at Uncle Jim's just a few days after the call from Anna. Anna and her husband stayed for a few hours to help me get settled in. Jim seemed really glad to have me around. As much as I hated to admit it, I could see why Anna was thinking about a nursing home. Jim would insist on doing everything himself, and within the first week there were a few false scares and forgotten pots on the stove. Eventually he started to feel more comfortable with me helping around the house and seemed to enjoy having more time to just sitting on the porch with Rex. Even though I missed the city, I began to feel somewhat more comfortable at Jim's. I still felt a tad uneasy when I went into town, though, because Chase still lived locally. More than anything, I found myself getting bored. I didn't have any real friends here and there wasn't much to do. One evening, I found myself taking a drive after Jim went to bed. I just needed to get out of the house for a while. I stayed away from town and was listening to music with my windows down on the back roads. I was actually having a pretty good time until I noticed a truck behind me. I didn't think much of it at first, but they seemed to be gaining on me despite the fact that I was driving well over the speed limit. There weren't any other cars, so I figured they would pass me. They didn't. I glanced up at the rear view mirror and quickly looked back down. The driver was a male around my age. I couldn't see him that well, but he did look a lot like Chase. It was hard to say for certain since I hadn't seen him in years. The truck continued to aggressively follow me. I began panicking, fear welling up into my chest. I reached into my purse for my phone. Damn it! It wasn't there. I remembered putting it on the charger and I must have forgotten to take it off. I could feel myself start to hyperventilate, but I knew I had to stay in control. Abruptly and without thinking, I took a sharp right turn onto a single-lane dirt road. Despite it being dark, I turned off my headlights and sped forward. I took a few random turns, one left, one right, then another left. Luckily, I didn't see any sign of the truck once I turned off. I began to wonder if I overreacted. Maybe it wasn't Chase after all. Either way, the driver still seemed questionable. Why tailgate someone for so many miles out in the middle of nowhere when you could easily pass? I quickly realized that I didn't know where I was. Great. Now I was lost at night with no phone. I tried my best to navigate my way home, but nothing was looking familiar. Just as I was losing hope, I saw a light ahead. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The familiar bright red sign of Target. But how? I glanced around and didn't see anything nearby. No other stores, homes, or businesses. I knew from experience that Target stores are never in small towns. Certainly not on the outskirts of a small, impoverished town in West Virginia. I slowly pulled into the parking lot. I didn't see any other cars there. It was pretty late, so maybe they were closed. I decided to walk up and see. I missed shopping at Target while living in Louisville, and it would be nice to be able to get some things to make my room and office at Jim's feel more like home. To my surprise, the store was open. The glass doors opened as I approached. I grabbed a cart, excited to start shopping. I started in the cosmetics aisle, grabbing a few facial creams. I quickly noticed something unusual. There seemed to be no one else in the store. I didn't see any customers or employees. I figured maybe they were just short-staffed and not busy this time of night. I also noticed there was no music playing overhead. The only sound I could hear was the light buzzing of the fluorescent lights. I continued to walk through the aisles and made my way to home decor. I saw a cute storage ottoman that would be a great fit for my room. When I picked up the box, I noticed it was covered in a thick layer of dust. I coughed. I glanced around and noticed a few items similarly covered. I continued with my shopping, albeit slightly annoyed at the dust. I was looking at some containers on a lower shelf when I noticed black shoe prints on the ground. This place wasn't very clean for a Target, but I shrugged it off. I would need to get used to things being different here. I remembered that Jim had mentioned needing some more ibuprofen, so I decided to take a look at the medical aisle. I was grabbing a box of ibuprofen when I noticed a row of nebulizers. While I wasn't surprised to see this in the medical aisle, I was shocked at how many types they had and how much of the shelving they took up. The first few rows consisted of ones I'd seen before when my mom was in the hospital. But as I glanced down, I noticed more unusual-looking medical devices. They looked vaguely familiar, like maybe I'd seen them before in an antique store. Some looked brand new while others were rusted and covered in dust. I also noticed a bunch of oxygen tanks further down the aisle. Like the nebulizers, some looked brand new while others looked like they were decades old and worn. Nothing in here made sense. Why would a Target have all of these oxygen tanks and vintage medical supplies? Was it even safe to store the oxygen like this? I paused and picked one of the older-looking breathing machines up. As I tilted it, a black liquid spilled out. I dropped it and wiped my hand on my pants, cussing to myself. I started getting a bad feeling. I was in a strangely placed Target on the outskirts of my hometown that appeared to have no one else in it but did stock strange items that don't belong in Target. I started to wonder if maybe the store was abandoned. I contemplated abandoning my cart and leaving the store, but as dumb as it sounds, I hadn't been able to buy anything special for myself in a long time, and I was really hoping to get what I came in for. I made my way up to the front and noticed there were no self-checkouts. I glanced around looking for an open checkout. The lights on each line were off and I didn't see any workers. "Hello?" I called out hesitantly. There was no response. I was starting to walk back towards the doors when I noticed a worker. His back was turned, but I recognized the red shirt. "Hey," I called out. He didn't answer and continued walking away. Feeling frustrated, I decided to head home. As I tried to leave, the glass doors stood still. I tried pulling them apart, but they wouldn't budge. My heart began to pound. I felt trapped, like a caged animal. I was stuck, alone, in this weird store that defied all common sense. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a clock. It was 10 p.m. on the dot. I started to reason with myself. Yes, the store's a little off compared to the Targets where I was from, but the doors are probably only locked because they close at 10, and maybe the employee was just wearing AirPods or had hearing issues. I started walking back through the store and saw the employee. His back was turned again and he was walking ahead of me. I continued to try to call out to him with no response. Finally, I got close enough and tapped him on the shoulder. He turned his head to reveal a blank canvas of skin with no facial features present. This person, or whatever it was, has no eyes, mouth, or nose. I jumped back in horror and ran. I ran further into the store, not stopping to look back. I couldn't believe how big the store was. I'd been running for so long without hitting a wall or seeing another exit, and the store appeared to go on indefinitely. I noticed that the light was becoming dimmer and dimmer as I went forward. It was almost in the dark by the time I stopped running. The setup and merchandise of the store was becoming less and less familiar as I went further in. The aisles in the darker section of the store were filled with bags of coal, rusty-looking gas masks, and a variety of tools that looked decades old. I noticed that I was hearing faint noise, footsteps and hushed voices. I glanced around to see that there were other people in the store. At first I felt relieved, especially when I saw they had faces, unlike the employee. But then I noticed something was off. All of the people were covered head to toe in a sort of black dust. They were also dressed in clothing that looked over 50 years old. Some wore gas masks, others didn't. A few had headlamps. I knew coal mining was a big industry in West Virginia, but nothing here looked modern. One of the men turned to look at me. His eyes widened and he began sprinting towards me, steel pick in hand. I ran but tripped and he quickly caught up to me. He was hovering over me and I was certain the pick would soon be crashing into my skull when another man pushed him away and I took off. At this point I was so deep in the store that it was pitch black. I saw people walking around but tried to avoid being noticed. I saw a faint light towards the back of the store. It was a cave with people surrounding it. The entrance glowed orange like a fire was lit. I hid behind a shelf and tried to figure out what they were looking at. Someone emerged from the cave and an empty mine cart followed in tow. A man walked up to it and began emptying huge bags into it, the contents of which crashed against the walls of the trolley. I could see the outline of the last few bits coming out of the bag. Bones. I stood there frozen in terrified silence, watching this strange ritual play out. Little did I know, it would only get stranger. I heard loud footsteps and the floor vibrated beneath my feet. I could see a shadow from within the cave. It appeared to be hunched over, as if it was too tall to stand up straight in the cave. As the figure emerged, I could see it was humanoid in shape and stature but had a generous display of antlers. I remembered Jim telling us kids legends about Wendigos in the area. He claimed to have encountered one while hunting. I didn't believe him at the time, especially with his track record of telling tall tales, but there was nothing else that could describe what I was seeing. The Wendigo let out what I can only describe as a demonic screech. It spoke in a low, distorted voice. "I need more," it yelled. The man standing next to the trolley said something in a quiet voice that I couldn't make out. The Wendigo lowered its head so it was eye level with the people standing there and snarled, causing a few of them to jump back. It then retreated back into the cave. "What the hell?" I whispered. Just then, a hand covered my mouth. I turned around and noticed it was the same man who pushed the guy who attacked me earlier. His skin was hot to the touch, almost burning my lips. I tried to scream but he tightened his hand around my mouth. He whispered to me, "You need to stay quiet or you're going to end up in that mine cart. If you keep quiet I'll help you get out." Apprehensive, I nodded. He took his hand off. He glanced around and motioned for me to follow him. He pulled me off into an aisle as there were a lot of people walking back from the cave. "We need to give everyone a few minutes to clear out before looking for the way out," he said. "There's a janitor's closet up front. We need to make a beeline for it and stay as quiet as possible, got that?" I nodded. We were able to get into the closet safely. The man lit up some archaic-looking lantern. And I was able to see his face for that first time. He looked to be late 20s and was covered in soot like the others. Despite his gritty appearance, he had kind-looking eyes. "What is this place?" I asked, stammering. The man chuckled. "It's whatever you want it to be. For some it's a bar, others a casino, hell, I've even seen it be a strip club." I gave him a confused look. "Look, I don't have time to go into all the fairy tales and lore behind this place, but it's basically the perfect storm of cryptids and angry human spirits," he explained. "West Virginia hasn't treated its people so well for a long time and hasn't treated the environment much better. When you have hundreds of people dying an early and ugly death because of unsafe working conditions, their spirits tend to stick around. The cryptids weren't happy with their land being invaded either, so we teamed up and here we are. The cryptids require so many human sacrifices each year in order to maintain their alliance with the human spirits. The human spirits are happy to pitch in because most here are full of rage and want revenge on the people living now for enjoying the fruits of their labor." I stared at him. "My name's Andy, but the way," he said casually. "So this place is like a live trap for humans?" I asked. Andy nodded. "Pretty much. People who happen to pass by see something that would draw them in, like moths to a porch light." I felt embarrassed. I fell for thinking a target would be in the middle of nowhere. "Were you a coal miner?" I asked, trying to wrap my head around this. Andy nodded. "Yeah, I died way before you were ever born." "Was it a collapse?" I asked. "No, it was lung complication," he responded. "Wait, so if all the human spirits here are angry and need sacrifices, why are you helping me?" I asked. Andy shrugged. "It all's starting to lose its luster for me. Don't get me wrong, I'm angry I died so young, especially because my daughter wasn't even 2 yet, but making other people suffer a worse fate isn't gonna change how my life turned out. When it's just drunken assholes walking in here hoping to cheat on their wife, I don't feel so bad, but you look like you have your whole life ahead of you." Andy and I talked for a while, waiting for the others to clear out. Andy told me that once daylight hits, the target will disappear. If I'm not on the outside, I'll be stuck hiding in here until I'm caught and sacrificed. At some point in the night, I heard a distant scream. It was definitely a human being killed. I could tell Andy tried his best to act like he didn't hear it and to distract me, but I knew what I heard. About an hour after we got to the closet, Andy opened the door and looked around. "It looks like the coast is clear," he said, smiling. "But where's the way out?" "The door was locked. You have to go out the same way you came in. The laws of reality still apply to the door you entered through. So if it was locked, we need to break it or pry it open." "Okay," I answered hesitantly. Andy and I carefully began making our way to the front of the store. Andy grabbed a crowbar off a nearby shelf. Once we were up front, he began prying the door open. The sound of a security system blared the second it opened. Before I could leave the store, someone grabbed me from behind. It was one of the many human spirits. They all came running when they heard the security system. They began to surround me. The one who grabbed me, a large gruff-looking man wearing overalls and covered in soot, began to strangle me. I tried to fight myself free, but it was no use. I felt the breath leaving my lungs and began to feel dizzy. Just as I was accepting my fate, a familiar face emerged from the crowd. Andy hit the man holding me in the face with the crowbar, bloodying his mouth, then yanked me towards the door. The others attempted to grab me and Andy. One tried to grab my arm and I clawed and bit him until he let go. As Andy and I got closer to the slightly open door, the spirits began pushing us up against the glass. It felt like I was being crushed. Andy managed to make enough room to move me closer to the door. The crowbar had fallen during the struggle and I couldn't reach it. I was going to be crushed if I didn't get this door open. I pulled at it for what felt like forever, my fingernails breaking off and bleeding in the process. Then it finally opened enough for me to skip out and I ran out. I turned back to see the others were angrily turning on Andy. "Adelia, take this and give it to my daughter," he yelled and tossed a worn envelope out the door. I inched back towards him. "I'm gonna help you, Andy," I said. "No," he screamed, "just make sure my daughter gets the envelope." I hesitated, then grabbed it and ran to my car. I peeled out of there and was quickly back on the road. I was shaking and hyperventilating the entire drive. It was daybreak by the time I made my way home. Still in the driveway, I looked at the envelope. It was heavy. The outside had a name. The ink was so faded I could barely see it. "Josie Reyes," I read. On the inside there was an old-looking watch. I looked it over for a few minutes. Just then there was a tap on my window. I jumped. It was Jim. "Good God, Jim, you scared me," I gasped as I got out of the car. He looked concerned. "Where were you? You look like hell." I shook my head. "It's a long story. I went shopping but I got lost." "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. I saw something, that's for sure." Jim gave me a knowing look. "You know, I've seen a lot living here all these years. I was kind of glad when you moved away, thinking maybe you'd be spared some of the strangeness that comes along with living here. But there's more good here than bad. There's so many good people around here that would literally give you the shirt off their back. I guess what I'm trying to say is when a beautiful landscape and caring, hard-working people are exploited year after year, things start getting weird. The politicians who line their pockets may not be keeping score, but Mother Nature is supernatural forces too." I nodded. "Jim, do you know someone named Josie Reyes?" I asked. "Yeah, she plays poker here every Saturday," he responded, looking curious. "I have something I need you to give her." I told him. Third story. This story was shared by you/Queens_Jester, so credits to him. Something lies beyond the Alaska Range. Day 14. I suppose I should preface this with some kind of backstory, but I'm entirely unsure of where to begin. I don't know if I should write most of what's happened here down in the first place, as it's rather unfathomable, to say the least. The last time I looked out the window I saw those things, and I still can't believe they're real. But I gather that as I see them in the flesh, they are indeed real, and they are coming for me. It's been approximately 14 days since I arrived at this small cabin in the forest just beyond the Alaska Range. I rented it out with my 3 friends, Jesse, Alex, and a native Alaskan, and we planned to stay here for at least a week, but things changed. I guess I knew the moment we entered the woods, something was wrong. I could feel the atmosphere change as the car drove into the canopy of pines and aspens, a kind of weight compounding onto me. The air around the car seemed to seep into the vents with a vile stench unlike that had been there just moments before. All of us in the car reacted to it almost instantaneously, pinching our noses and blaming the one next to us for the smell, though when I bent to the vent and took a good whiff, I scrunched my nose even further, exclaiming the horrid stink was coming from it. Nah, it's definitely from Jesse and those gross hot dogs from the gas station earlier. Alex barked, giggling as he playfully shoved the curly, golden-haired man sitting next to him in the back seat. Shoulda ate him without the chili sauce. Jesse, the accused, pushed his friend back and proclaimed his innocence. Wasn't me. I already went to the bathroom, maybe it was Cheyenne. Just 'cause she's a girl doesn't mean she doesn't do that kind of stuff. I furrowed my brows at being the next to be accused. I just told you it was the vents, guys. Even though I reiterated my words, they still argued with each other, the older of the two giving the other a noogie on his head after trapping him in a headlock. I turned back in my chair to face the front and closed the vents I could reach. What do you think it is? I inquired to the person driving, a raven-haired, olive-skinned man who was firmly grasping the steering wheel and peeked a glance at me. Probably just some dead animals or something. Nothing to worry about. I took his words as reassurance. For some reason, this man was always able to keep me at ease with just a few words. His name was Inuk and he was Inuit, part of one of the main tribes here in Alaska. I always thought it was strange he was so far south, but he said it was because his family sought exploration. Out of the three of them, Inuk was probably my closest friend. I'll miss him. When we arrived at the cabin, it was nearly dusk already and we still had to carry everything in, blankets and pillows, food and drinks, a few things to keep us busy over the next week. While hauling in the goods from the trunk, the smell seemed to have followed us the entire way, wrapping its heinous tentacles around our nostrils. Gah, it followed us. Jesse whined, absent-mindedly rubbing his nose to push the scent away. Told you it was you. Alex laughed as he towed one of the last baskets inside. Jesse shoved him forward and the four of us made our way through the door. I can guess that Inuk's expression as he turned to me after locking the door behind us was for the same reason as I'm writing about this now. He saw something as he closed the door, or knew something from the weird smell outside, or something. He was pale when he looked at me, eyes wide and mouth partly open. His brows were slightly furrowed as well, but when I inquired, he just cleared his throat and shook his head. It's nothing. He let out a brief, airy laugh. Just wanting to know what was in those hot dogs Jesse ate. Inuk walked past me and towards the other two men, helping to unload the crates and put away the goods in cabinets and the fridge. For a little while, we all sat back drinking beer and playing cards. We eventually cooked up some hamburgers and brats on the indoor griller and Alex got the antenna just right on the TV for a few channels to come in. It was pretty late in the evening when we all headed in for the night, Alex and Jesse taking the room at the end of the hall, Inuk in the bedroom just before the bathroom, and I slept on the lounge chair. I believe it was around 3, maybe 4 in the morning when I was jolted awake by a loud bang at the front door. I shot straight up and let the blanket tied around my midsection pull around my feet as I stood at the base of the couch. I waited for a moment or two, wondering if I was just hearing things in my head from a dream when all of a sudden another thud, and another thundered in the air. The sharp sound sent me back into a sitting position and I recoiled to the corner of the lounge section, pulling the blanket up over my knees and around my back, hoping this was just a bad dream as fear rippled through me. When more and more thuds came from the other side of the door, Inuk and the others came running into the living room and had to yell to be heard. What the hell is that? Alex barked, watching the front door literally vibrate with each new bang. Enoch moved to me and asked if I was okay, wrapping a hand around my back and squeezing my shoulder in reassurance. The noise became louder and louder. We were all sure it, whatever it was going to break through and get inside, but just as the sound seemed to reach its peak, it stopped. "What the fuck?" Jesse broke the silence and slowly stepped towards the door, unconsciously taking lighter and lighter steps as he got closer. When he reached the door, he placed his open palm upon it and felt for something, anything. When there was nothing, he put his ear to it in hopes he may hear whatever it was that was originally making noise. Again, nothing. He pulled back and swallowed hard. "I'm gonna open it," he proclaimed, taking the lock in his hands and undoing it. "What? What the fuck, no." Alex denied, gripping his friend's shirt at the back to try and pull him away. "We don't know what's out there." "Exactly." Jesse yanked his shirt free from Alex and took hold of the doorknob. "It could just be an angry buck or something, Dot. And you wanna let it in?" Alex attempted to hold the door closed and pushed Jesse away, but the shorter man kept hold of the door handle. "It could also be someone who's hurt and needs help," Jesse proposed. Alex looked at me and Enoch, possibly looking for an explanation why anyone would be out here besides all of us. He looked back to Jesse and gave his own explanation. "If it was someone who needed help, don't you think they would have said something by now, not hit the door millions of times to scare the shit out of the people inside? And anyway, how does whoever or whatever it is know there's people in here in the first place?" Jesse was moving to push Alex out of the way and pull open the door when a new sound erupted, a sharp pair of nails scraping the wood of the door from the very top to the bottom. When the sound became louder and faster, as if whatever on the other side was becoming more vigorous in its motions, the two arguing men backed away slowly, the couch now at their backs. Then, a thud, then another, and another. A soft whine, like that of a newborn goat or lamb, rang in the air for several seconds, followed by more thuds and scraping. Looks of horror were plastered across everyone's faces while the noises pressed inside between the cracks and crevices of the door frame. "What in the holy hell?" Jesse whispered, his breath hitching when the noises suddenly stopped again, perhaps reacting to the sound of him talking. For a few moments there was complete silence, but it was quickly abashed by the feeling of dread that washed over us as we noticed the doorknob begin to turn. Jesse flew to the door and shut the lock again, backing away just as quickly. When the door didn't open, the handle began to turn back and forth repeatedly. The continuous clicking of the locking mechanism held in place by a thin rod was like literal music to our ears. But a far more hideous noise was to come. The clicking ceased and the knob stood still, thumping and scratching taking their places. A voice was then heard, unlike any other voice I have ever heard before it, a voice that held no rhythm, no cadence, no real sound behind it, like when an animal tries to speak and sound human but isn't. "Let me in." Day 15. Supplies are running low. I've got about 2 more days of granola bars and tuna packs, but my water stash is just about spent, only about a fourth of a 1-liter bottle and a full regular-sized water bottle. If I space it out, maybe I could make it last, but, who knows? I would have spent more time planning out my food situation had I known my trip to this godforsaken cabin was going to be extended this long, but no one really knows what the future holds. I'm really starting to hate the fact that I'm alone, too. I can hear those things whining and wailing each night, calling out to each other, waiting to see how they get to me. I wonder if they even realize I'm here still. They must if they're sticking around. To clarify, I'm currently in the attic, stored away with a crate that held a small collection of food and the water that was previously in the fridge at the start of this trip. To tell you how I got here, let me continue the story from last night. The thing on the other side of the door spoke to us in a voice akin to what a cat sounds like when it tries to talk like a human in those weird internet videos. It was more of a whine mixed with a shrill, nasally sound than the sound a voice makes when two people are talking to each other. Nonetheless, we understood it clearly. "Let me in." More bangs followed soon after, but each of us were glued to the sofa, not moving an inch from where we sat and not making a single sound in response to whatever it was talking to us. This seemed to go on for forever, the banging, the scraping, the whines, but in reality, it had to have been only for about 3 or 4 hours, because when daylight broke over the horizon the sounds died down. Still, none of us dared move a muscle until we felt comfortable enough that the thing was gone, or at least lost enough interest to find a new target to scare the crap out of. When that happened, Alex was the first to get up, slowly creeping up to the door but stopping a few feet from it, perhaps deciding against what he and Jesse had just done a few hours before. He turned to the rest of us and cleared his throat before speaking. "We need to leave, now," he declared. "We need to get our shit, and fucking leave." Before any of us could protest, Alex moved to the kitchen, grabbed the stacked crates and began to pile the goods that had been unloaded the night before back into them. "Alex, calm down." Jesse walked up to his friend and gestured for him to slow his roll and take a breath before proceeding. "Calm down. Calm down." Alex looked flabbergasted at the man before him. Had he not just seen what he had seen? "There is something out there and it ain't no deer," he deduced, shoving full bottles of water into a crate and taking out the boxes of food from the cabinets. "Well, Jesse started but was cut off." "Well, nothing. It talked. It fucking talked." Alex finished storing the food into the crates as Enoch and I joined him and Jesse in the kitchen. "Ain't no deer here or anywhere that can talk, Jesse." "It could still be a person," Jesse postulated, earning an incredulous look from Alex. "Are you kidding me? If it was a person, I ain't sticking around to find out what the fuck is wrong with it." Alex took one of the crates in his hands and hauled it towards the door, aiming to go outside. "Now I'm getting the hell out of here, y'all can come or stay, that's your choice." We followed him to the door as he sat the crate next to it and placed a cautious hand on the knob. He took in a deep breath and looked back at us. "That thing should be gone by now, so, we gotta get out of here before it comes back. Maybe more'll come, and I don't want to be here to find out just what the hell it is." "Maybe you shouldn't go out there," Enoch suggested, stepping forward and raising a stopping hand to his friend. "We don't know exactly what we're dealing with, and for all we know it could be at the other side of the door waiting for you to open it." Those words sent a chill down my back. Just the very thought that this thing was smart enough to plan an ambush attack like that meant it may not be an animal, or at least no animal I'd ever heard of. Alex breathed another apprehensive sigh but shook his head. "Even so, we got to try, right? If we don't get out of here," we were all thinking it, maybe that thing wanted to get in because it wanted us, to hurt us, to eat us, to kill us. We didn't know, and the fear of the unknown was driving Alex to move. "I'm going," he stated, taking hold of the lock, twisting it open and bracing himself for what may be on the other side of the door. When he opened the door, slowly and cautiously, he was met with, "Nothing on the other side." And by nothing, I mean nothing, no birds chirping, no frogs rib-biting, no ambient forest animal sounds, nothing but clear daylight all the way to the wood line. I could hear Alex breathe a sigh of relief at the absence of some mythological creature waiting to gobble him up and spit out the bones. He bent to take hold of the crate again and started to walk out the door. "You coming?" Those words rang in my ears as we all watched him head for the car. He was only 10 or so feet from the trunk door when, out of nowhere, a dark flash blipped across the grass, snatching Alex and zooming out of view before any of us could get a good look at it. It happened so fast, we didn't have much time to react. The crate Alex had been holding hit the ground with a soft thud, and for several seconds there was complete silence as we each processed what had just occurred. When we realized that thing had indeed been waiting for the door to be opened, for one of us to come out so it could attack, a loud scream sounded from the woods in the direction the flash had disappeared to. In that moment, Enoch moved to the door, slamming it closed, shutting the lock and placing his back firmly against the wood, shielding us from the outside. It took Jesse and me a moment to gather words, and just as I was about to speak, Jesse tumbled to the floor, soaking in the fact his friend had just been taken by some forest beast that none of us knew what it was. "What?" I looked at Jesse for a moment before taking a seat next to him and putting my hands on his shoulders. "Cheyenne, Jesse," Enoch called for our attentions. "Get up. We have to lock all the doors and the windows. Come on." Enoch rushed past me and Jesse as he moved to seal the house shut. Jesse didn't budge, but I knew I had to help Enoch, so I stood and followed him to the back of the cabin, closing the blinds to each window as I ensured their locks were securely fastened. When we got back to the living room, Jesse was still sat on the floor, now curled up in a ball with his knees to his chest and his face buried in them. "Jesse," I called out to him, approaching gently and squatting to his level. I again put my hands on his shoulders and tried to calm him. "We should dash," he cut me off. "No," Jesse yelped. "Did you see what that thing did to him? It took him. He's probably dead. And I was gonna let the thing inside." Tears started to stream down Jesse's face as he began to rock back and forth. "Alex is dead. You're probably right." Enoch's voice caught me off guard because I was trying to calm Jesse and his words would only rile him up. I gave him a disapproving glare as he continued. "That thing out there probably killed him, and there's probably more of them waiting to get us." What? Jesse questioned, eyeing the mobile Enoch while he triple-checked that the front door was locked tight. "What do you mean? How do you know?" "Well, I wasn't sure at first, with just the smell and the weird atmosphere here in the woods, but when I heard that thing talk last night, it made it all clear." Enoch leaned against the door and crossed his arms over his chest. "You know what it is?" I presumed. "I do." He nodded. "What? What the hell was that thing, then? And why didn't you stop Alex from leaving?" Jesse yelled as he got to his feet and clenched his fists in anger and confusion. It's got lots of names, but it's better known around here as a Wendigo." "What the fuck is that?" "Windy what? What are you saying, Enoch?" Jesse got closer to him. "It's a Wendigo," I uttered, and Jesse turned to me and raised a brow, unwilling to believe the words that had just come out of my mouth. "Excuse me?" he begged. "A Wendigo," I repeated. "Right?" I looked at Enoch, who nodded. "But I thought, those things aren't real, Cheyenne." Jesse pinched the bridge of his nose and took a seat on the couch as he processed the information being given to him. "It's just some native legends, something elders tell the kids of their tribes, so they don't go wandering outside the protection of their people. It can't be real." He breathed in a frustrated sigh. "Not real?" Enoch echoed. Did you see what just happened, Jesse? And the smell, the sounds that thing was making? That's exactly what it is. Jesse groaned and reiterated his words before Enoch could continue. No, no, no. I don't know what took Alex, but it wasn't some mythological creature that eats people and can only be killed with bullets covered in ash. There's no way that's even remotely possible. Jesse rubbed his temples and closed his eyes. But, what if it is? I suggested, sitting next to Jesse, who let out another groan. What if that thing out there actually is some kind of monster and it's not just, like, a bear or some angry person, or something? We could be in serious here. Okay, he laughed briefly, clapping his hands together and standing before putting his hands on his hips and looking between me and Enoch. Let's say it is this thing, this Wendigo, then what? What do we do? Somehow, magically conjure up some gun with ash bullets and take it and its friends out and get the hell out of here? What? Jesse threw his hands up in the air waiting for an explanation. We stay here. Enoch stated, causing Jesse to chuckle and scratch his head. If we try to leave, we'll end up like Alex. We stay here for a few days, we hold up and we wait. Wait for what? Who's coming for us? No one will even know anything's wrong until a week down the line, Enoch. We'll be long dead by then, if this thing really is what you say it is. Jesse grinned viciously, heading to the kitchen and pulling a beer from one of the crates that Alex had loaded. He cracked it open, tossed the cap on the floor, and took a swig. Can't leave, shouldn't stay. We're fucked. Jesse dash. No, we are. We really are. He repeated. You really think it can't get in? You think that a lock is gonna stop a whole ass Wendigo? Are you high right now? He took another sip of his beer. Stopped it last night, didn't it? Enoch concluded. Jesse just looked at him. Obviously, even though it knows how to hunt, how to lure people out, it still has some limited intelligence. It barely knows how to function a door. If we keep things locked, ration our food and water, he looked at the nearly empty bottle of beer Jesse continued to drink, we can wait it out. It'll lose interest eventually, find something else to hunt. We all got quiet for a few moments, pondering Enoch's words and looking at each other. You really think we have a snowball's chance? Jesse joked, taking the last gulp of his beer and looking Enoch in the eye. The other man took a moment before answering, choosing to be completely honest with his friend. No. But we got to try, right? Day 16. We sat around the cabin for several days, about a week total before things started getting really hairy. Most days consisted of cards games and making plans on how to escape, often interrupted by the sounds of something running around outside and tearing the trees and foliage apart. Most nights were generally restless. We were all in the living room, huddled on the couch facing the door just in case something tried to break in. We wanted to face whatever it was head on, even if it would have been a severely unmatched fight. The monster outside was effortlessly downing full-sized aspens and pines and tearing bushes and plants from their roots for whatever reason, and if it had the strength to do that, it had enough strength to tear each of us limb from limb. It wasn't until around 3 or 4 days into our isolation that the creature finally came into view one night. Jesse said he could see something coming out of the woods from one of the front windows, prompting me and Enoch to join him in peering out the corner of it at whatever was outside. What I saw scarred me for life, but I must say that if I was to ever encounter a true Wendigo, this creature fit the profile. It held a large buck skull over its head and stood nearly 7 feet tall. It had dark, ashen skin and the flesh that stuck to its form seemed to be stretched so thin it may rip at any moment. The long, spindly limbs forced it into a gangle-like motion as it walked, bipedal, but slow. There was a large fur tied to its waist and draped over the lower parts of its body that swayed in the wind as it hobbled forward. Jesus Christ, what's it carrying? Dragging behind the creature was a large carcass, held by the back legs and being tugged along as blood and entrails spilled out. Is that a bear? It appeared to be a large brown bear, maybe a Kodiak, that the monster was towing along. Suddenly, it pulled the dead animal over its shoulder to land in front of it not a few 100 feet from the entryway to the cabin. We finally got a look at what all those trees and shrubs were being downed for. It was making a nesting area to rest as it ate, slept, and relaxed. It tore into the bear, clamping down on the intestines, flesh, and all. We all sat back as it consumed the forest dweller, holding back our vomit while watching it pulling tendons and slimy bits from the body. Jesse finally closed the curtains and we all quietly turned in for the night. Around the 7-day mark, Jesse was starting to get stir-crazy, unable to sit still and starting to rifle through the food and drink crates and fridge to see what we still had. He was getting antsy and unsure if we were going to be able to wait this thing out like Enoch said, but he eventually calmed enough for us to have another round of cards, poker this time. So, Jesse started, his voice trailing off as he awkwardly scratched his head and fidgeted with his cards. "What's up?" Enoch straightened his hand and looked at the taller man, watching him intently. Don't you think it's time for us to go?" Jesse didn't mince words. "Jesse I was about to say but Enoch cut me off. We've been through this, we have to wait. If we wait for too long, we'll starve." Jesse barked, slamming his cards on the table and turning to me. "Cheyenne, listen to me, we can't just stay here, we're gonna die." "Jesse, please I wanted to stop him, I knew where this was going, I knew this was going to be a repeat of what happened to Alex if we just let him continue with his rampage. But there wasn't much either I or Enoch could do to calm him down. No. No more of this negotiating and rationing and playing cards like there isn't some monster right outside waiting to eat us. We have to leave. Look," Jesse stood and made his way to the window, pulling open the corner of the curtain to show us something. "It's gone right now, out hunting or whatever, it'll be gone for a little while. This is our chance. We can go now, and it won't get to us. Cheyenne, come with me." He offered a hand to me, and I looked at Enoch who was brooding as he watched both me and Jesse move around. "He can stay here with his Wendigo." Jesse glared at Enoch who shot him daggers right back. "Jesse, I wanted to prevent him from leaving, from becoming another body, from dying like Alex. Just because that thing wasn't there right now doesn't mean it wasn't around. We didn't see it at first when Alex opened the door either, it just came from out of nowhere and snatched him up. I didn't want to lose another friend. You don't have to do this. We can stay here, we can wait." Jesse scoffed at the idea and charged past me into the kitchen. He grabbed a full bottle of beer, snapped it open, chugged it, and slammed the empty container on the table before turning back towards the door and stopping in front of it. I had followed him into the kitchen and waited at the archway that led into the living room. Jesse took hold of the doorknob once more, for the final time. I saw the handle turn and I saw Enoch move to be able to slam the door back just as Jesse left, but he wouldn't get that chance. Jesse pulled open the door to the sight of a new view. I only saw it for a second because the moment it was there, it practically sucked Jesse out of the cabin, and I dipped behind the wall of the archway and hid in the kitchen. I could only describe what I heard as the horrid screeches and shouts of someone being torn apart, as the thing must have also taken Enoch. I heard a slam, like that of what the door would sound like if it had gotten shut forcefully. I stood there for a moment, waiting for something, a sound, movement, death, I didn't know. But what finally moved me was the renewed shouts and yelps from outside in a voice I recognized as Enoch. The thing had gotten him, snatched him from the opening of the front door and took him like it took Jesse and Alex before. I threw my hands over my mouth and muffled my cries as tears streamed down my face. All my friends had been killed by this monster and it was coming for me next. I just knew it. I knew I was gonna be ripped limb from limb just like them. It was then that more noises began to sound from the living room, bangs and thuds at the door. It had returned for me. I jolted from my thoughts of despair and looked around. I resolved that if I was going to die, I was gonna fight till the very end, so, if I could find a weapon to help attack that thing, no matter how fruitless a task that may be, I was gonna do it. Then I saw it. The nearly invisible clip that was almost completely flush with the ceiling. An attic. I took mere moments to gather myself and charged forward to grab at the clip, just a few feet higher than me but low enough that I only had to hop to reach it. When I finally grasped it, I yanked hard to reveal the steps that led to a dusty upper level. The bangs became louder and louder, though, this time, it sounded as if the door would indeed break, the middle and the frame already beginning to splinter. I moved quickly, taking hold of a crate of food and water in each arm, and as I reached the narrow opening at the top of the meager ladder, I tossed each in and pushed them back out of the walkway. I pushed myself into the open area and tugged at the ladder with every ounce of strength in me and sealed the attic shut. Just a few seconds after it closed, I heard the undeniable sound of the front door shattering in heavy, thunderous footsteps walking into the cabin. It was inside. I heard the Wendigo walking around each step it took, sending shivers down my spine. I could hear the guttural groans, clicks, and smacks it was making with its mouth and body, unlike an animal I had ever heard before it. I then heard the creature make its way into the kitchen. I held my breath and put my hands over my mouth and nose, hoping I wouldn't make the slightest noise to alert it of my presence. When it stopped just below the entrance to the attic, I shut my eyes so tight I saw colors. I jumped clear out of my skin when it let out a shrill scream so loud, I could swear my ears would have started to bleed if I didn't cover them. Luckily, because it was so loud, it didn't hear me shift my body away from the entrance, or at least that's what I believe, or else it would have joined me long ago. When it stopped, I could hear it walk away. The sound of wood being tossed about rang in my ears for a few seconds just before I could hear nothing else. I exhaled in relief, sure to not be too loud in case there was still something inside the cabin that I just couldn't hear. I've stayed in this attic for nearly 10 days now, being as quiet as possible whenever I have to use the bathroom or whenever I'm eating or drinking. I pulled out my phone a few days ago to see if I could get a signal, but no such luck out in the wilderness like this. I've been typing up on my notepad about what's been going on so far, but I don't know how much longer I've got. I can hear them moaning and wailing every night, but it's been dark for nearly 4 hours now according to my watch, and I haven't heard a single sound from anything out there. I'm starting to wonder. Day 17. Okay, so it looks like I might have a chance. I'm not putting all my money on it just yet, but there may be hope. Enoch said that those things could lose interest and find something else to hunt if you were to just wait it out, and I think that might have happened. The thing that came in probably thought it killed all the people left in the house and no one was left behind, but with the smell of the blood all around maybe it didn't notice my scent. I'm not 100% on that, but my thing is, I haven't heard them and the noises in the forest are back. I heard owls and even a hog last night. I thought one of those things came inside again, but then I heard a squeal and an oinking sound, like how a pig makes. I'm assuming that if the wildlife is back, then those things must be gone, or else they wouldn't dare get close enough to trail into its territory. I'm guessing if I can wait for just a little longer to confirm my theory, I might be able to get out of here. I still have half a bottle of water, 2 packs of tuna and a granola bar. I'm sure I can make it. Day 18. Another night without any weird sounds. I'm taking this as a sign that the coast is clear. I've just chugged the last of my water and scarfed down the last of my tuna. If I get down there and I wind up dying, better to go on a full stomach. I've lowered the attic ladder and so far, so good. I don't hear much but the wind from outside. I think I can hear birds chirping from outside and the sounds of ambient nature, but it's unclear if there's any danger yet. Okay, I'm down the ladder and into the living room. The door is in shards, completely destroyed and covered in large claws marks on a few chunks of it. Looks like a bit of blood and hair is embedded into the crevices and cracks in it, too. I've taken a glance outside and there's no sign of those monsters, not even in that weird den thing one made from before. I see the car, it looks relatively unharmed and intact. I've got the keys firmly in hand and I'm gonna make a run for it. Here's hoping. Oh my God, I made it, I'm inside. I've tried the car, luckily it still runs perfectly even without being turned on for 2 weeks. Old piece of crap still works like a charm. I'm on my way out, finally. I'm completely ignoring the bumps and sharp turns. I know exactly how to drive to get out of here and I'm not taking it slow just because there's a few bumps in the road. The smell from just a few days before isn't in the air anymore, it simply smells like the forest and an old car and Enoch and Jesse and Alex. Like Enoch's cologne, Alex's clothes, and Jesse's gas station hot dogs. As I take another harsh turn, I have to start wiping my eyes as tears begin to flood my vision. I'm bawling my eyes out because my friends are dead, and no one is sitting next to me complaining about my bad driving skills or why it's taking so long to get out of this damned forest. No one is arguing in the back seat about whose hair is better or whose clothes are nicer or why Jesse can't hold in his gassy hot dogs. The realization of losing my only friends in the world hits me like a freight train and I have to keep blinking and wiping my eyes because my tears are blocking my view. It's getting hard to breathe, I can tell I'm hyperventilating but I refuse to stop, I'm going home. I'm gonna tell Enoch's parents and Jesse's and Alex's that they died trying to get home, too. It took what seemed like forever, but probably was only 20 or 30 minutes, to reach the end of the forest. I made it out and onto a paved road and I sped like a woman with a lead foot out onto the highway as far and as fast as I could. I never looked back at that godforsaken forest. Day 22. I made to safety just a few hours after I reached the highway a few days ago. I drove and drove and drove until I ran out of gas, luckily running directly into a gas station just moments before. I told the clerk I had nothing on me, no money, no possessions, but if he'd let me use the phone to call the authorities, I'd stay inside with it and return it just as soon as I was finished. When I told the cops I had been attacked, I, of course, amended the story to a significant degree, sure to replace key aspects like the fact that it was a 7-foot-tall mythological creature with white skin and wore a deer skull for a helmet. I made sure to let them know that my friends had been killed as well, but that it wasn't safe to go into the woods to look for their bodies, the animal might just attack them, too. When they asked me what it was exactly, I lied and said it was a massive bear, or something like a bear, at least, that I didn't get a good look at the thing to give an accurate description. I told them they may want a large, possible 20 or 30 man team to get the bear, because even with so many men, it could easily tear each of them to shreds. That's just how powerful the thing was. The officer laughed at me over the phone, citing the words, "We have guns, sweetheart." So, it seems even if these men do set out to track down the bear that attacked me and my friends, they won't be of much worth in a fight. They didn't seem to take my warnings too seriously, but we'll just have to see how that plays out, in the end. Should you ever go out to the forests beyond the Alaska range, make sure you light a fire for me and my friends, and make sure it burns good and hot, because you'll need the ash when the fire goes out. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.